Hey guys, what's up? First, I want to thank everybody in my previous video. I've had a lot of people in the community that have given me a lot of really helpful tips and told me some of the things I was doing wrong, and I really appreciate it. And I just want everyone to know that I definitely pay a lot of attention to those comments, and I really try to put the things I learned from you guys to use. And you'll see in these sets of videos, I've actually gotten a lot better, in large part due to the great feedback that I've gotten from everybody. So thank you so much for all the help that you've given me. You'll see something that I do where I kind of roll for no apparent reason. And a lot of times if I'm locked on, the reason is because I'm trying to buffer a running attack. But when you're locked on, at least I haven't figured out a way to buffer a running attack while locked on without rolling first. So you'll see me kind of switch to unlocked, especially with a curved sword. The running attacks are so good. I want to make sure I'm taking advantage of them. And there you see me making a mistake that I think I heard Nagash talking about in one of his videos. I break somebody's guard, and I just instinctively run up to take the riposte rather than actually taking advantage of his decreased defenses. And there, obviously, you saw I had trouble getting through the shield. I've actually got a Shodel that T-Leaf gave me, thanks T-Leaf, and I really should be trying to switch to that when I see somebody shielding up. And this guy here, I'm pretty sure had a dried finger on. In fact, I know for a fact he did, and you'll see why in an upcoming clip. In the past, I had kind of been more relying on me invading other people, or I'm sorry, other people invading me, and there I got a lot better at spacing Black Flame. And there I sucked at rolling that magic, but I know people, I think Nif told me that I need to roll a lot sooner, and you'll see he tries to hit me with it in an upcoming bit here. I missed the spear coming out, and that's why I died, but he'll make a return appearance, and I do a much better job of rolling the magic on reaction. But back to the whole idea of being invaded rather than invading. I had started off trying to be invaded because I figured playing against other people who play PvP would help make me better faster. And there's probably some truth in that. But at the same time, if everyone that's invading you is so much better than you, it's a problem. You can't really learn quickly enough. So I think the key is to find people that are closely matched enough in skill to you that you can learn from them, because you don't want to just wipe the floor with people. That's you're not learning anything. But at the same time, if they're whipping up on you, you're not learning anything. So I switched to invading, and it gave me I think a broader range of skill sets of opponents. And here's that same guy. Obviously, he's got the dried fingers on because there was another invader there. And this time I see Dark Bead coming, and I'm actually able to roll quickly enough to avoid the damage. And there again, I'm able to avoid it. You're trying to figure out how much poise people have is such a huge part of this game. Because like in that case with a greatsword, I was able to swing twice before he could get to his second swing and break my poise, and I was able to break his. And it really reinforces for me. And I ran into this a lot, guys gesturing at you when you invade, and I happen to not be a fan of just running up and backstabbing them, especially when it's a solo host. But man, that is such a mistake, because most people will run up and stab you in the back when you do that. But it reinforced for me on my first character, trying to use a greatsword was probably a mistake. Greatswords in this game, I think, are much harder to use than they were in Dark Souls 3. Straight swords obviously aren't nearly as good. Curved swords, on the other hand, are really good. I've got a bunch of other weapons that I've upgraded or I've had other people drop for me, and I'll probably be switching it up here in the near future, because I'm starting to do pretty well, I think, with the curved swords. So I think it's time to try something like maybe a katana. I know katanas are also really powerful in this game, and I certainly ran into my fair share of them. And speaking of weapon types, even though the faster weapons tend to work better, at least for me they do, the ultra great swords in this game, just slower weapons in general, seem to be a lot more usable, because the way that the the damage seems to get calculated because it seems to happen all on the client side. You have to roll so much earlier, and I know Nif was making this point to me in my previous video. It seems, given that you can get hit much earlier in the swing, Ultra Greatswords seem like they would be a lot more viable. And I think the problem that I personally have is I'm so used to waiting and delaying my roll, especially against like an Ultra Great or a Halberd, because it gives you that bit of extra time to make sure that you've successfully identified the attack. Like, the great club, you're going to want to wait in DS3 and wait and roll to make sure that it's actually the R1 you think is coming and you're rolling rather than the R2, and then you go and get roll caught. The infinite stun too on some of these weapons like the Spy is definitely a problem. I've gotten caught more than a couple times that way. And I'm trying to work on toggling, but I haven't had enough cases of it where I've really been able to practice and get better at it. The other thing I think that's been probably more fun for me about actually invading other players rather than getting invaded myself is you don't deal with nearly as many one-shot builds. That has definitely been a source of frustration of mine, and it's something I've got a video I'm working on the side that's going to be pretty involved, and that's one of the things I'm going to be talking about is the number of one-shot builds that you come across. And here, this was just a perfect example of what I was talking about. A halberd is a slow weapon, but because I was taking damage so early in the swing, I wasn't rolling in time. I think one of those might have been trades, but just otherwise getting hit out of neutral. I mean, the thought of getting hit out of neutral in Dark Souls 3 by an Ultra Great or even by like a halberd was almost unthinkable to me, but it's a real threat in this game. And one thing I like about the halberds in this game, and along with other weapons, is that whiffs have consequences. The recovery is much longer. There's actual whiff animation that's much harder to manage. I'm not sure why I didn't get the backstab there or there. I'm getting better at dealing with poise. My muscle memory is slowly getting acclimated to the fact that I can't just assume that when I hit somebody, they're going to go into hit stun and I get another free follow-up attack. That took me a little bit to get used to. This invasion here was pretty funny. I had seen Nif use Fire Tempest or something similar. I don't know if it was actually Fire Tempest. And I had taken to keeping it equipped when I invaded here, so if I got blocked here on the bridge, I had some way to try to escape. And this is actually the first time I ever used it in an invasion right here. And the Phantom actually panic rolls into Fire Tempest. And I had no idea that it was that powerful. I was completely shocked at this point to see that I had actually killed the Phantom outright with that spell. I mean, Pyros, Magic, Faith, Miracles, they are all so much more powerful in this game than they were in Dark Souls 3. And that's taken some getting used to. I mean, miracles, sorceries, pyros are an enormous threat in this game, and you have to be really, really careful. This invasion was kind of funny. I was off in the kiln farming up some supplies, and this guy invaded me. And this guy's like a classic Dark Souls 3 parry spammer. And a parry spammer like this in Dark Souls 3 would have been reasonably easy to punish, but punishing this in Dark Souls 1 is almost like trivial. Unfortunately, the Fury Sword doesn't do a ton of backstab damage, so I switch over to the Rapier and actually get my first PvP parry against this guy. And the parry timing in this game is a lot different. I've been practicing against the PvE, and I decided to actually crank my my invasion skills up to Dickhead and go invading in the tombs. And I only did this for a couple of minutes. I had just a couple of quick invasions that I did. And I'm pretty sure, at least in the original, the way that light sources worked is that the light source was unique to you in the sense that my opponent can't see the light that I'm generating. And if he's generating light, say by virtue of like a cast light spell, I would not be able to take advantage of that light. And I don't know if they changed that for the remaster. I assume they didn't. And I see this guy trying to circle backstab me, and I've seen Saints videos where he talked about just counter strafing, and that is a very good tool that I've been able to use. And this guy just gets lucky because I knock him off 2 cliffs in a row, and they happen to be 2 cliffs with something underneath. invading a lone host in this game, I think the hosts are at a real disadvantage. And I think in particular, the terrain and the levels are not friendly and conducive to fighting. This is just an awful, awful place to get invaded. You can't see. This guy has no light source that I can tell of. So I don't know if he's just blundering around in the dark on his side or what. But like I said, I invaded here just a couple times and then I stopped because there's no challenge. It's not fun. And actually I ended up feeling bad for the people that I invaded. So I had a couple invasions and then I stopped. And something else actually that I'll be talking about in my upcoming video is the sort of the origin of the invader as griefer meme. I understood it in Dark Souls 3, though I didn't agree with it. But boy, do I understand it in Dark Souls 1. You can really, really, really mess with people in Dark Souls 1 in a way that you really can't in Dark Souls 3. The levels, I think, are a lot harder. Invaders have a much greater advantage relative to the host. I think you, over the course of the ensuing games, from kind of nerfed invaders to a certain extent and made things a lot harder for them. But it was just a free-for-all back in this game. The knowledge gap between people who PvP and people who don't, I think, is much larger. And there's a whole host of reasons, and I'll probably save most of those for my upcoming video. As you can see here, the camera is just awful. I can't really see what I'm doing at all. And there seems to be some sort of, I don't know if it's a problem with my controller or if it's a bug in the game, but when I go to parry, I very often end up parrying twice. Now, if I'm really close to the person, it doesn't matter because the riposte has priority, so I'll actually riposte through the second parry attempt. And here I'm chasing after the guy and catching him with a backstab. And, that's fun when you're on the delivering end, but no fun when you're on the receiving end, because on his screen, he probably looked like he was quite a bit further away, and that was probably somewhat of a shock to him. Again, people gesturing at the beginning of invasions. And I'm waiting for somebody to try that. And then when I gesture in return, go to try to backstab me. It hasn't happened yet, but as soon as it does, I will probably stop counter gesturing. There's something funny that happened in this invasion. We'll see in a second. So backstabs against halberd users are pretty easy when you're in close. Now watch what happens. I guess that wasn't an actual chain. There's some other examples later on of me chaining people, and it's by accident. What I've learned is that the timing in Dark Souls 3 for roll catching people with a curved sword on Wake Up is just right, so that when you try to catch somebody with a curved sword on Wake Up in Dark Souls 1, you can inadvertently chain them. And here I see, because of the arrows where this guy is, and I decided to go with Fire Tempest. And it was at this point that I kind of decided that I wasn't going to use Fire Tempest anymore against solo hosts. It's just so powerful. It one-shots them, and that's just not fun. It's certainly not fun for the person to whom it happens. And this guy seemed pretty good. This was a fun invasion. Getting that war pick, the whiff animation. I'm really starting to get comfortable with the spacing. I'm getting more comfortable with locking on and locking off. Again, with the curved sword, trying to lock off mostly to open up that running attack. I think Neptune Sequester had a video about buffered running attacks with katanas. I don't know if it's while locked on or not. I'll have to go check that out, but maybe there is a way to actually buffer the attack without unlocking. And one funny thing that I've noticed is when I invade solo hosts, I tend to let them clear out the PvE or whatever in the area first. The nicer I am, the more likely I am to get indicted. And this guy was actually pretty good. It was funny, when I first heard the memes about Giant Dad, I assumed that Giant Dad would not be any kind of a problem for me at all, but I'm very much mistaken. It's a very difficult build for me to counter with all that poise. And the spacing with combustion. It's really hard to get in on somebody like that, especially when they've got a ton of poise. That's still something that's a build I'm still struggling to figure out how I deal with the really poisey guy that's got black flame or combustion or something. You see this guy here, he's trying to circle strafe me, so I'm thinking maybe I'll try to counter it here in a minute. I think there I tried, but I was probably too late. And there I get him. That is a very, very common PvE player type strategy, that circle strafing. I mean, you certainly ran into it in Dark Souls 3, but I don't think I ran into it with anywhere near the frequency that I'm seeing it here in Dark Souls 1. So at first I thought it was a solo player here. I realize it's 2 players, so I'm not going to just walk up to him out there. Although in retrospect, I probably ought to have, because at least there was some PvE to help me. Over here, there's really nobody to help me out. Fortunately here, the host decides to kind of hang back. And there, obviously, I tried to backstab the buff, but it was too fast. That's actually the first time I think I've ever seen somebody buff a weapon like that, like a miracle buff. Fortunately, this guy has no poise at all, so I can just kind of wreck on him. Really surprised the Phantom didn't run back to try to heal there. One thing I'd like to hear from everyone is weapon recommendations. So the build that I'm rocking, actually going back to my original point about learning from everyone in the comments, this whole build was constructed essentially out of a set of recommendations I got on YouTube. So the build, which I don't think I actually showed off at all, he's a soul level 60. The stats are pretty well split between stamina and vitality. And then I've got just enough dex and strength to hit the bare requirements on a small set of weapons. I think I've got like 15 strength and 14 dex. And that was very sloppy right there. But I'd be curious if anyone else has any weapon recommendations. I'm rocking all chaos weapons right now. My next build, I'm not sure what I want to do. Dex definitely seems to be the way to go. This isn't really obviously a true Dex build. This is a stamina and vit build. But I'm thinking maybe for my next build, rather than going for like a mid-level build, I would go with something like, I don't know, like a soul level 120, 130 true Dex build. But we'll have to see. So if you have recommendations, I'd be curious to hear them. This is actually the last invasion clip that I've got for you guys, and really just want to emphasize how grateful I am to everybody that's left all the encouraging comments and all the tips on getting better. It's really made the game a lot more fun. I definitely feel like there's a real noticeable improvement in my gameplay between these clips and the ones that I showcased most recently, and that's really only probably separated by about a couple hours of invasions. It really didn't take much for me to get that much better. So thanks everybody, really appreciate it. Take care now.